kitchen done?
What's that?
Is your kitchen done?
No, I've been working on consulting stuff.
Did I hit it?
Yeah, you got to keep paying the bills.
Okay. Is it on?
I can understand that.
Mm-hmm. Look at you being all techy. You're right. You gotta be able to fix this.
Yeah.
We also just started the budget flag.
So we doing the PowerPoint tonight? I don't know, I'm not aware of any. I'm just so tired from doing all my shopping. Oh, that's right, I didn't start yet. I have two little things for my wife. I only have to shop for her. I actually went and out, got the meat today.
Woohoo!
I went to the restaurant. ShopRite had no fillets at all. I went to Restaurant Depot. Needless to say, this is which one up there? Forks. So, see, Southside's the same way. I mean, it's the number of people getting prescriptions is ridiculous. It is
and
ridiculous.
they're taking lunch now. CVS. For
Yeah,
half
CVS
an
is
hour.
taking lunch for a half
All
hour.
of them.
They closed.
The best is
They're
in
closed.
Hellertown, the CVS. Mary, you know what time they close in Hellertown? 6.
Oh my word!
Believe that. That's
And they were
terrible.
jammed.
Hello, Peter.
Mayor?
How are you?
All right.
You sitting in Joel's seat? Joel's on the end. All right.
Mark's not here.
Mark's not here, right?
I give him a.
Hey, Rob, how you doing?
What? Were you expecting to stay out for the while?
Yeah, see? Family segment too.
Oh Lord, help me.
Put my hand through that thing.
She's the ringleader. What?
Tony, good to see you. All the-
Hey, Tony.
How are you, Joe?
Is this your last meeting?
No. One more. January 4th.
Oh, you do have one more.
January
Third.
4th. Third.
3rd. I'm coming the 4th.
Monday the 3rd.
Call her, Rita. Call her.
But thank you, Tony. That was very nice of you.
Came.
Thank you so much.
So, how are you?
Are you sharpening up your Spanish up there? How's your Spanish going?
You good enough, right? They sent us to us.
Yeah, I saw
How are you doing? Todo bien? I think we open up Pandora's
That's right. There we go.
Would I like to do that? No, but I would like to. But we can
I don't believe it. So last night I went. So I went to Merle's.
No, you're covering.
Girolamo.
Yeah, I saw that
You're
game.
gonna be covering
Next Monday.
just tonight.
I just read Monday. Hello, guy. How you doing?
Well, I've done
I
that
just
too.
read
And
Monday,
when it's
so I
black.
went out
Is
there.
anybody there?
No.
Did
it's
he have another one? It was
No.
black, yeah.
It's dark. I said,
That's
where is everybody? So I looked at it on my.
Do I have the wrong place, right? They're holding her that long.
The other day, and I got
Yeah.
for the first time in like 40 years.
Well,
Can, I know
Val
they
Davis's
can.
daughter is
And I got another, like,
When
running
the track
someone
was
else.
Friday night, I didn't want
What's
to.
happening? What's happening?
tracks I didn't get to.
I sent
Welcome
Kurt.
to Zoom.
Next Friday, next
Enter
Monday.
your meeting ID followed by pound. Enter your participant ID followed by pound. Otherwise,
As
just
in go,
press
that
pound
work.
to continue. Please enter the meeting password followed by pound. You have joined the meeting as an attendee and will be muted throughout the meeting.
Maybe,
Yeah, true, right?
you can start, and once you break, we can troubleshoot.
The host would
any
like
other-
you to unmute your
Okay,
microphone.
Okay, well, just
You can
just
press
still
star
1 minute
6
of.
Okay.
to unmute.
Okay.
You are unmuted.
We'll call the state session of City Council order. Please rise for the pledge of the flag and evocation. God of peace, we invite you to preside over this meeting. Even if we have different opinions, give us a unity of spirit. Help us each listen politely to the others that share their points of view. Help us to work as a unified team in combining ideas for the greater outcome for our residents. Help us to work as a whole rather than as individuals trying to promote our own agendas. May we have a spirit of camaraderie in this room and work together for our shared mission. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag.
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Ettinger? Mr. Milan?
Here.
Mr. O'Connell?
Here.
Dr. Ruggles?
Here.
Mrs. Volpino?
Here,
And Mayor Panto.
Here. At this time, we're going to recess, just to give you an idea of the flavor of the meeting. We're going to recess right now so that the parking authority can meet. It may be rudimentary that they may not have it. I see they don't have a quorum. There's 2 of the 4 people here, and there's 2 on Zoom, so they can conduct their meeting. And then we're going to reconvene city council meeting. I do that before the approval of the agenda because we may or may not address bill number 46 this evening. That depends on the outcome of the parking authority. So we'll recess it at this point, and we'll reconvene after the parking authority meeting. And parking authority can take over the dais.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Skip.
Yes.
Chief.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Skip Fairchild. I'm the chairman of the Easton Parking Authority. At this time, I would like to call this special meeting of the Easton Parking Authority to order.
All right. How you doing?
Roll call, please. Jamie Krulek,
Present.
George Borowski,
Skip George is making his way to the die right now.
okay. Skip Fairchild, present. Rob Wierzowski,
Present.
Wozniak, is George Borowski present?
Present. Present.
Okay.
And Peter
At
Corey
this
is here as
time,
well.
we will approve the minutes from our meeting of December 16th. Are there any corrections or changes in those minutes?
No, there are not.
No.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion
This
to
is
approve.
Jamie, I'll move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion to approve the minutes passes. Next on the agenda is the chairman's comments. This agenda item is usually reserved for the end of our meetings, but I felt I needed to put it at this point in the agenda for this meeting. The reason the Easton Parking Authority is having this special meeting tonight is to resolve an issue that appeared on our agenda that was introduced to us during our meeting of December 16th. At that meeting, our solicitor, Graham Simmons, introduced a proposal for the Parking Authority to approve the sale of the 3rd and Pine Street garage to the Center City Development Corporation. During that meeting, there were questions raised that needed further review in order to have a complete understanding of the proposed project. We are now under unfinished business. I would like our solicitor to introduce the proposal again and to address and answer any legal questions that may pertain to this proposal.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So in front of the authority is an agreement of sale for the property commonly known as the Pine Street Garage. This is part of an ordinance that was introduced by City Council, which I will read in relevant part, is the purchase and sale agreement for premises located at 27 South 3rd Street between the City of Easton and the Easton Parking Authority, collectively as the seller, and 27 South Street Associates LP as purchaser, pursuant to the terms of the agreement, including a purchase price of $3 million. Now, and again, I'll say for everybody who cannot see this, this approval, and this I'm reading from the ordinance that was introduced at City Council on December 8th. This approval is conditioned upon approval by the independent action of the Easton Parking Authority to be taken prior to formal adoption of this ordinance by City Council at its January meeting. As most of you know, at the last meeting, I took you through the terms of the purchase and sale agreement. There were questions relating to the project and some of the larger reasons why the city is proposing to do this and why they feel it's a good idea that I was not in a position to answer as a solicitor because my job is to answer the legal questions. But I will start off by saying that the role of the parking authority itself, ultimately, and for those of you who don't know, the parking authority is ultimately a creature of statute. The parking authority was created by the City of Easton in accordance with the authority under the Parking Authorities Act in Pennsylvania. And so a parking authority can only do what it is expressly permitted to do under that parking authority law. Now, the parking authority law is clear that one of the powers given to a parking authority under Pennsylvania law is it can buy and sell real estate as it chooses. Okay, and under the law, and I think everybody's aware of this, certainly on the board, but I'll say it for the benefit of the public present, that the business of the parking authority is ultimately administered by the board, and the board is given a level of discretion in doing that. There's no fiduciary obligation, or at least no legal fiduciary duty upon the board in administering its duties, but the board ultimately serves at the pleasure of the City of Easton. Because it is ultimately subordinate to the City of Easton. And for those, and again, I think the board is very well of this, but I'll say it again for the benefit of the public that's present or listening. The parking authority is not an operating authority in the traditional sense like you might see in Bethlehem or Allentown. It simply exists by virtue of the fact that it was created back in the 70s for purposes of building the Pine Street Garage. And to this date, the only thing that the parking authority does, well, historically has done, is own the Pine Street Garage, the garage behind City Hall here, and then a surface lot on North 3rd Street. Now, within the past 5 years, I'll say, the parking authority took on a new task because the city moved to decriminalize the parking ticket process within the City of Easton. There's a number of policy reasons for that I'm not going to get into tonight, but since that time, the Parking Authority has also served as the hearing tribunal for parking ticket appeals within the City of Easton. So that is ultimately the purpose of the Parking Authority, but I think at this point, if there's any specific legal questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them. But if there are questions as it relates to the project itself and some of what may come from the sale of the property, I know that there are representatives from the City of Easton here tonight who are happy to answer those questions as well. So fire away.
Thank you, Graham. Number one, are there any other questions or any questions for Graham at this time?
Graham, I have one question for you.
Sure.
I've always heard.
Okay, thank you.
You have to speak into the mic.
Hold on there 1 second, Skip.
Okay.
I always heard we were at the discretion of the mayor, or is it the is it the city? Is it the city
No, it's
council?
the mayor.
It's the mayor. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. That was it. You said the city of Easton, and
Okay, well,
technically, the mayor
the
represents
mayor
the city,
is,
but
right, as the head elected official, acts on behalf of the city.
Yeah.
So,
very good.
Graham, if I may, I just want to make a point of clarification. You had mentioned that the garage, the 3rd Street garage behind City Hall, the intermodal, is owned by the parking authority. I just wanted to make that clarification, that the ownership is by the city of Easton. So
oh, I'm sorry, you're correct.
and the only reason why I'm bringing that up, because there's a lot of discussion out there, and it is very complex information. It's not the kind of thing that is everyday talk, and it really shouldn't be. It is complex. But for that purpose, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the city pledged its full faith, its full credit in order to ensure the bonding and for this garage and the financing. And I just wanted to make sure that that's something that doesn't just go over everyone's head, because we're going to be talking about that, I think, in short time, if there are any other questions. But
Right.
as a tool, authorities have been used for financing purposes in addition to many other different things. But I think you hit the nail on the head when we look at the authority as a whole, and these are great questions, and the parking system is something that needs to be analyzed with a fine-tooth comb. But when you look at the system as a whole, there's really a lot of shared responsibilities here in the city of Easton. And the authority itself right now is not being used as that tool to go out and finance projects or acquire new property. And that's for many different reasons. But I wanted to make sure we made that clarification.
Yes, sorry, I forgot. You remind me now, because I think there was a master lease which had to be done for purposes of some of the FTA funds that I think Lanta was bringing to the table. But you're correct about that. And you remind me of another point, which is the authority can't be an operating authority, and I think the members of the board might remember this, but we can't be an operating authority without an ordinance from the city of Easton to that effect. So.
Thank you, Graham. Are there any other questions of Graham before we move on? Hearing none, does the city wish to make comments or just answer any questions that may come up during the course of this meeting?
Mr. Fairchild, this is Louis Campos, City Administrator. Just for the record, the city had submitted answers to questions that were posed by one of your board members. So the city has submitted those questions, and if there are additional questions on top of that, the city's prepared to answer them. If you want clarifications to any of those questions, the city's here also to address them.
Thank you, Louis. Well, with that, are there any questions? And number one, I believe all the members of the Parking Authority received that email answering the questions that Louis commented about. With that, are there any questions to the city from any members of the Parking Authority?
Anyone? No.
This is Jamie. I don't have any new. This is Jamie. I don't have any new questions. And because my questions were answered in writing prior to this meeting, so I mean, I'm reviewing those answers now. I don't have any other questions right now.
I have
Thank
a
you,
question.
Jamie. George, do you have any questions?
No, I do not at this time.
I have a question, Skip. It's Rob.
Go ahead, Rob.
Sure. I was curious to know, currently we have daily parkers there. We have open parking available in this lot. And if this project is to come to fruition, I understand some of those parking spaces would be available down the street or perhaps in the back of 4th Street. Is that making up what we're losing?
The short answer is yes, and there will be a net increase to the current parking system of roughly anywhere between 100 and 300 spaces. But it's probably
For
more,
daily,
this
for daily parkers? Or for just parking, period? Because
parking period, just to make the answer simple. And so it's probably more like in the 150 range of a net increase of what we have today, after taking into consideration new parking demand requirements, for example, the Seville project. So currently, to give you an idea, to try to break it down a little bit further, there's about anywhere between 350 or so monthly contracted parkers that are located in the Pine Street Garage. The new project will allow for 200 of those parkers to stay in the Pine Street Garage. The new project on 4th Street is almost a 1-to-1 ratio in terms of new parking spaces. So the current garage is about 520, 530 spaces. The new garage is going to be around 500 spaces. So that you have to take into consideration then the 200 spaces that the developer is going to absorb, that 200 of the 400 spaces that currently are used for monthly parkers.
Gotcha. So then...
Now, the other thing, Rob, I apologize, just to finish off this discussion, because a lot of this discussion, as it was accurately put, falls on the ultimate operator of the system is the city. So, and that's staff internally, and the staff reports to city council. So a lot of these discussions on operations happens here in city council chambers, specifically. So one of the tasks that occurred during this process was to find about 300 new spaces. So it's not just the 200. There were about 100 new spaces found on on-street parking that are going to make up, or that are going to add to the parking system.
So you're adding 100 street parking spaces?
That's correct. So the total increase is somewhere around 300 spaces.
And is that downtown, or is that in the city of Easton?
That's all downtown. Yeah.
100 spaces downtown?
Yes.
Because I do have a concern, and I think other people who have businesses downtown might have concerns. Crayola, pre-COVID, would regularly pack the parking lot on a weekday even, not on the weekends as well, but especially even just on a weekday. And so I see, like, I guess as a member of the parking authority, I'm not a big fan of cars or parking, but it's a necessary evil, and I just see more. I read some Facebook stuff, but and Sal made a great comment that we want to increase density in our town, which I am all for, but not density of cars. I'm not a huge fan of density of cars. A car takes up a lot more space than a human being, and not every apartment necessarily needs a car or needs a parking space, in my opinion. I mean, I may be in a minority here, but all of the major cities of the world do not have sufficient parking. It's the nature of a city. But for businesses, having convenience, having the availability of people to come and go, I know plenty of people complain about metered parking, but if you didn't have metered parking, you'd have people like myself included who would just park on Northampton Street all day long and go to work, because I can walk to work and I just leave my car on the street, and that doesn't help it doesn't help businesses. So I have that concern, and I just didn't know if that has really fully been explored.
So there will be a net, I guess, positive to the structured parking spaces, just because of the 200 that are going to be absorbed with this project. So while there's, like I said, while Seville's going to take up some of those spaces, there's still going to be a net positive.
Okay.
Are there any more questions for representatives from the city? All right, hearing none, we will then move on to the proposal?
Mr. Chairman?
Does someone want to make, yes,
Sorry, I
Yeah.
think there was somebody in the public that had a question.
Yes, I do. Okay, is there any way that you can do theaters, like, for 8 hours, 9 hours, and they put the money in, or they pay it for a certain amount at the city of Easton? That way they have a parking spot if they're by their work. I mean, if they, we put in for 9 hours, okay, to get rid of lunch and don't get a ticket.
Yeah.
I mean,
So so I'm going to defer in a moment, actually, to the city administrator, ma'am. But I'll just reiterate: parking authority does not control the on-street parking system in Easton. All we own land. That's pretty much all we do, and then we hear the parking ticket appeals. So, but no, I think and that's why I'm going to let the city administrator address it, because I think he's the one in the position to comment in terms of the feasibility or where we go with that. So.
Well, all I'm going to say is cite what the mayor has publicly stated on putting together a forum, if you will, to continue to talk about these parking issues. But to answer your question directly, these are the kind of comments that right now, the way we're built, the way you take in the input, is you present these ideas to city council. You voice any concerns to city council. If it's not your city council representative, you can come here twice a month on Wednesdays and bring up your issues and your concerns. It's certainly a question. It's a question that's not going to go away, because as I was explaining to a friend of mine who's here visiting in town, who's from Easton, we're in the fortunate position right now that we have a lot of investment coming into the city. So these are the type of problems that we have, which is a good problem to have.
Skip, you can't
Mr.
see.
Chairman,
know,
if I could,
okay.
if I could address it. I just want to address Rob's question because it's the most misunderstood question. We're not decreasing dailies. If anything, we're increasing dailies. They'll be at the North 4th Street lot, not the South 3rd Street lot. It's equidistant, the same distance.
Can you state who's speaking? It's
That's-
very
that's the
difficult
mayor.
to
South
understand.
Panto, City of Easton. And so there's actually a net increase of daily parking. And like right today, I took a snapshot, which other people have done and blasted us for even building a garage. There were 368 spaces available, 328 spaces available in the Pine Street garage, and 264 spaces available in the 3rd Street garage. So we don't have a daily problem, unfortunately. And very honestly, and I know Rob's here, it's easier for the developer to sell the monthly passes and for us to put all the dailies into the 4th Street garage. The 4th Street garage, and some of the people who were complaining, have businesses along Bank Street. And Bank Street is going to be upgraded, which again, by the developer of the Seville, so that it's easier to traverse from there to the Crayola experience. And we did meet, Louis and I met with the CEO of Crayola, and he was more than happy to have his guests park over there. I guess a lot of the businesses that I heard from were complaining because they park in the garage, the 400,000 guests every year, park in the garage, walk in the back door, then walk to the car and go home. And they never see them other than maybe a restaurant here and there. This will force people that are coming into the city, the guests, to actually walk down Bank Street and come down to Pine and go in the back door and actually experience our circle as they go in the front door. So I think Louis talked about the 100, for example, the one-way street on Northampton Street created 20 additional parking spaces because of ankle parking. The 200 block will have that same thing as soon as the skating rink is in the process of being taken down now. And that'll give us 40 spaces right there of the 100. So yes, we definitely want the dailies. Why? Because the daily customers to Crayola pay $3 an hour. The monthlies pay $70 a month. We turn over those spaces 2 or 3 times a day when they're really busy. And we're a business. We're trying to create revenue for the other projects in the city. So that it was a good point because it was misinterpreted, I think, that we were getting rid of daily parking. No, that's just like when I said, no more residential parking permits for new residents downtown. Everybody thought I was getting rid of the residential parking permit. No, the people who live in that building have a parking space. they should not be allowed to buy our parking permit for $100 a year. And so they come home at night and they park on Third Street because it's closer. They don't park in the garage, in the deck. And so, yes, I think you're going to see within the first quarter of 2022, a proposal to City Council that will say those that need zoning to get their parking and they buy it from the city or they buy it from some private lot somewhere, they're not eligible for that residential parking permit. That residential parking permit is for those people who live in the traditional apartments that have been in here for 150 years, and they'll get it for $100 a year. Not the people who are living in the Marquee or the Confluence or the Commodore. Those developers are making arrangements to have them park someplace else. But I can tell you, some people who live in the Pomeroy building park on Northampton Street. And they're supposed to be parking in the Pine Street garage. But it was a good question.
So, Sal, this is Jamie Kulik. Would you say that the daily parking, the availability for daily parking is essentially being moved from the Pine Street garage to the new garage that's being built behind the market, which is the 4th Street garage?
Yes, that is absolutely cool. Yes, that is absolutely the truth. And frankly, what we find is that people would rather park in one of the new garages that is light, bright, well lit, and not dark, dirty, and dingy like our Pine Street garage. I want to thank Graham. Most people don't know this, but his father-in-law was the one person who built that place. L. Anderson Dobb, who's going on to help us with the State Theater, the Signal Museum. I mean, it was built back in the 60s. It's outlived its useful life. Somebody said, well, why don't you just take off the concrete and the rebar and put the steel structure itself? Just so you know, the city just spent $130,000 to repair it to last for another 12 months. The rebars are a problem, but sooner or later, and hopefully it's later, we've just done some repairs to tension rods. That once those tension rods start to snap, they start to shift the whole building. And we certainly don't want that to happen. And it's time to come down. I mean, you come into this garage behind City Hall, it's much nicer, and it's being used more at night than the Pine Street garage because it is darker and dingier, and it's just not well lit. Here we have beautiful LED lights every, 10 feet or something. Over there we have fluorescent bulbs yet.
Mayor, and the last just point on this is, that, there are some questions on why not just take down the current garage and build a new garage in its place. Well, unfortunately, we don't have that luxury because you would disrupt the system significantly. And the city had to build a new garage before you can take the current garage down. There was just no other choice. And but certainly, ultimately, council's the one who ruled. And any of these decisions that are in front of you and that we're talking about, they're the ones who endorsed it. As staff members, we're just telling you the story.
Sorry, Louis, can you complete the picture on that? So why are we not building why is the parking authority or the city not undertaking to tear down and build a new garage in its place? Can you provide some input on that so the public can hear about it too?
Well, you would disrupt the local economy significantly. I mean, it would to get rid of 500 spaces for about at least a year's time. The other thing is
no, I'm sorry. Well, sorry. Let me more eloquently ask my question then. So the Pine Street garage is going to get torn down, and regardless, it's getting torn down. And what the proposal is to sell the property to a developer, and they're going to develop it and put some other stuff on there, including some parking. Why is the city not just tearing it down and building its own new garage on that same spot, in the Pine Street spot?
Well, so the first part of the answer was that you can't displace all of those parking spaces for even a short period of time. So it's almost.
Yeah, but it's going to happen anyway.
Isn't that going to happen already?
Sorry, wait, Louis. It's going to happen anyway because the garage is getting torn down by either us or the developer. So I don't.
Well, you could significantly cause some serious damage to Crayola, for example. Like, yeah, and I can hear the mayor. It was about a 2-year construction. You're looking at right now a one-year construction. But the other thing is that you have some serious financial implications on the bond financing currently. And, a portion of the sale of this garage is going to help offset the cost of the current garage. Right now, we have about $15 million in bond financing. The delta is still unknown, and we have a good idea that it's going to be at least in the seven figures. We just don't know where it's going to fall. The garage itself had a lot of challenges when we were digging into the bedrock. And during construction on these types of projects, you always have a plus or minus deviation. Unfortunately, you always see on the plus side just because of things you can't control. One great example is COVID. COVID and the supply chain disruption globally has caused delays. Unfortunately, they were minor on our end, but you're seeing that all over the place, and that does cause problems. And you see that in contracts, as you all may know, in force majeure type of paragraphs within agreements, in construction agreements. The other thing, so we have the two is, one is due to financing, so you need the capital from the sale of this property, and then the other thing is the displacement of of all those spaces. I mean, it's just not feasible.
Okay, so this is Jamie again. So on the displacement, I don't think that's a valid. I mean, maybe I'm just not understanding it. I just want to be clear on what the reasons are. The displacement is going to happen regardless. There's going to be a lack of available spaces when the garage comes down for a period of time. So that's going to happen.
Yeah, the garage
cannot.
Jamie, just simply put, what do you do with 400 business employees and owners while the garage is being built? I mean,
I don't know. That's what everyone wants to know. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen when the Pine Street garage gets torn down.
No, when the Pine Street garage gets torn down in the short run, you can have. We're gonna. There's a lot of different variables, and that's a good question, and I see where you're coming from. So in the short run, you're going to be able to park some of those monthly parkers in the 4th Street garage. You're also going to be able to park some of those parkers in the 3rd Street garage. They are. No. I know. But then, see, it's complex because what happens is, as a result of this new development, you're going to have a lot more. You're going to have a lot more demand for all the parking spaces. At that point, when you have the new project, and by the way, if the project goes through, it still has to go through a very public planning process. All right, this is not the end. This is just the beginning. So it has to go through a planning process. But when that garage is finally built, that's when there's going to be about 300 spaces to support that particular project. And then 200 of those spaces are going to be utilized for the daytime economy for employees and small business owners. It's an extremely complex problem.
I understand, but it's not really that complex. It's just I think the answer to the ultimate question is the financing answer, because I mean, that's the issue, the financing, because the city needs the money. That's why we're selling it. And we can't afford to rebuild it ourselves.
This is Sal Panther. I'd like to address that. This is Sal Panther. I'd like to address that.
Okay, thanks.
First of all, the city is not demolishing the Pine Street garage because it's financially beneficial. It's demolishing because sooner or later, someone's going to get hurt. And we would rather it be much later than the $130,000 that we just put in it. Secondly, the Pine Street,
we already know that. The Pine Street.
Let me address your question. The Pine Street garage is not, even in the agreement of sale, does not get demolished until the 4th Street garage is built. So there's no delta of anything. We're going to have a net gain of parking spaces, not a net loss. If you would take the garage down now and want to build it on the site, you would be without 500 spaces in downtown Easton for at least 18 to 20 months. That's how long it's taking to build the 4th Street garage. because you're gonna find the same problems on this site. The underground is not very stable. So they have to go deeper. They went, 125 feet. So I think you're missing the point that
None
we
of
do
that
not
is the
take
response
this
of the
garage
question
down until the new
itself.
garage
None
is
of that-
built.
Okay, well, so what? The city can, the question is then, why does the city and or the parking authority not hold on to the Pine Street garage, wait until the new parking garage is completed, then tear down the Pine Street garage itself and build a new garage?
Because that would be an overabundance of space. It's a waste of $15 million of city taxpayer money. That's why, because we're already increasing the parking spaces in downtown. Structured parking is extremely expensive. It's the most expensive parking you can build. No one is going to spend $15 million. Right now, I just told you originally, we have 350 spaces available today in the Pine Street garage, and we have 264 in the Third Street garage. That's over 500 spaces that were vacant today. Why would you build an additional
You
500?
answered the question. But you answered the question. The answer to the question is because the city doesn't want just another parking garage. The city wants the property developed. You want to have something else in there, right? I think that's the answer to my question.
Obviously.
We're not just building it.
That's why we
we're not
bought
just
4th
tearing
Street.
it down. Okay, got it. Right. So the answer to the question is, I just want to make it clear to the public why a project is going in here in this fashion. So the question is, if the city has this parking garage, the Pine Street garage, and it's about to like crumble into the ground, so it needs to be torn down. So why don't we just tear it down and build a new garage? The answer is because we don't want just another stupid garage. We want to have the property developed, and the development is going to include additional parking. Correct? Is that the answer to the question?
That
I think
is
that's
correct.
The answer to the question.
That is correct.
Okay. Terrific. That makes sense. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Louis. Are there any other questions for anybody, either for the city or the parking authority? Hearing none, we'll move now on the proposal. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the sale of the 3rd and Pine Street garage to Center City Development Corporation?
This is Jamie Kulik. Before we move into
Actually,
hearing motions on the actual, go ahead.
sorry to interrupt you both,
Exactly.
but there's members of the public that would like to make a statement.
Okay. I was not aware of that. I can't
My
see what's
apologies.
going on.
Hi, my name is Joshua Davis. I reside at 50 North 9th Street. I have a few handouts. There's been some debate regarding the availability of parking. And there's been some lively debate about the increase or decrease of parking as a function of these different projects that are going on in. I revisited recently the Walker parking study from 2019 and took note of the assumptions that were made during that study and cross-applied the new projects to the using the schema that they had in there for determining parking availability, specifically when it came to peak demand. Mr. Administrator, and this certainly isn't criticism, but just looking for clarification because, as you noted, the city is seeing a great influx of investment. I want to make sure that we're not becoming victims of our own success. Based on the analysis that the folks at Walker used, they noted that even replacing the Pine Street garage with a parking structure of the same capacity, in addition to creating the 4th Street garage, would result in a deficit of 400 parking spaces, including the Court District during peak demand. Reevaluating based on the changes to the Commodore, the Confluence, as well as, my apologies, I forget the name of all the projects. The Marquee. It appears that we're going to be losing quite a few spaces in changing these projects, as well as increasing the demand significantly. And it looks like during peak demand, and I apologize, there's probably been a lot of developments and changes to the projects as a function of time, because these are from newspaper clippings, so I don't have the most recent proposals. but it looks like it'll be a deficit of over 1,000 parking spaces if we move forward with these projects. And as you noted, I know the city's looking adamantly to increase our capacity, especially for transient parkers as opposed to monthly. So I was wondering how the city was evaluating the available parking stock as compared to what the methodology that was used in the Walker study. Sorry.
If I may, Josh?
Yeah.
Okay. A couple things here. The Walker study, as studies go, is a little bit older now.
Yeah.
All right. And there were several things in the study that were not taken into consideration. Number one was that the two major projects that are occurring in the downtown
Right.
are including their own parking. But more importantly, it did not necessarily take the assumption that the developer could have a shared parking concept. So in other words, as I had mentioned before, out of the 400 monthly parkers or so, 200 could be absorbed by the development of the Pine Street Garage as a mixed-use project, which is something that wasn't referenced here because it wasn't necessarily the shared parking concept wasn't necessarily in this proposal. The second piece I think that is also missing is that there are about maybe a little over 100 or so, 120 municipal vehicles and employees that also can be shifted slightly in arrangements that the city is looking at. Now, in the short term, for the projects that we have in place, we did look at a net increase of about 300 spaces. So we had to take a look at the Walker study and say, well, what is the number that's needed? And one thing that occurred during the committee review process is that the committee was asking and was guided by the staff on some of the technical questions and technical answers. And the short answer was that the city needs about 300 new spaces once all these developments come into fruition. So that's anywhere between this coming year and 5 years. So the 300 spaces have been calculated as follows. 200 spaces would be absorbed by City Center in their project, the Marquee, and then 100 on-street spaces would be added in various areas in the city. This particular study that you're referencing was an analysis that was looking at the impact of the parking system with and without Da Vinci. So on the without Da Vinci portion, there were some considerations of what developments that were occurring. So that's, I don't know if that helps answer. And if it doesn't, Dave Hopkins, I think you could, if you could fill in any blanks if you think I didn't answer it, if there's something that I'm missing. If not, Josh, go ahead.
Oh, sure. I do believe that they accommodated, so there was two different scenarios, as you mentioned. They said that without the Da Vinci Center and the rehabilitation of the Pine Street Garage, the deficit was still 465 spaces. Also, has there been a change in the assumptions or in the modeling for the demand? Because when I used the same schema that was used.
But Josh, I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. But remember, on that 400 spaces, we added, we're adding spaces throughout, and that also includes some developments that did or did not occur. And also, it's the 300 spaces that we're adding plus about 100 or so employees and also city vehicles that we have.
I agree. I think the key question I have is this study, and assuming that there'd be a deficit of 465 spaces, already assumed that the Pine Street would be rehabilitated at its full capacity in addition to the 4th Street Garage. So we're already reducing that capacity, and based on the model that is applied in the Walker study, it appears to me, and I don't want to argue the numbers because I'm not sure what you guys used, it appears that both the Commodore, oh, sorry, not the Commodore, the Marquee and the city, the other project, based on their residential and commercial demand, are going to exceed the parking capacity that they're bringing independent of the share
So
Space sharing.
unfortunately, we haven't been as successful in some of the commercial projects.
Okay.
One thing that has been we've been a lot more confident on in general in this market has been residential development. The commercial projects, for example, the grocery store, they just could not get a retailer in the grocery store. That did take on assumes a certain amount of spaces per square foot, or however the formula is done at a zoning. So you're right. I will say this is, again, without looking in all the different details, the bottom line is that the city did take the Walker study. We then crunched our own numbers, and based on the development that's occurring, and said we cannot add, we need a net new of about 300 spaces. Now, the other thing is that the Walker study doesn't take into consideration, which something that when the committee looked at the marquee, or at least the staff was fairly impressed on that group understanding their metrics, is that they knew, and we're challenging their numbers, but they know what their average per car, per unit metric is. And that's why they can also say confidently that they're under the threshold that's required for the city. So they're under a 1.5 threshold.
Right.
And then the second part, and then they're actually probably closer, they're under 1.25 roughly, and that means something when we're calculating the numbers. The second piece to that is that we still don't know what the impact is going to be on the 185 South 3rd Street because of the lack of commercial. There's also going to be some shared opportunities that's going to occur there. But the commercial's not, it's not coming to fruition as we thought it was going to come through. It's just not that robust. The commercial market is not as strong as everyone thinks it is. Until the residential comes into play, the commercial will not be there.
Yeah, and I certainly agree that there's definitely going to be fluctuations. However, based on just the sheer volume, based on my analysis, and again, not to argue the numbers, I do think that we need to not stall this proposal, but we do need to make sure that we are working diligently to add additional parking.
I think you're right, and I quite frankly I welcome the challenge, and it's very thoughtful, and I'm glad that you're doing it.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Mr. Administrator. And I'm gonna leave. It's Taco Tuesday. I have to go through my. Thank you.
This is Dave Hopkins, Easton Public Works. I just wanted to bring up two salient points. One is, when we talk about peak demand, you really have to focus on your own parking system and not worry about what everybody else is doing. And do you build to the 90% planning horizon, 100%, and you want to be, to your comment, Rob, about Crayola being full. Pre-pandemic, we had, I think the last couple of years was maybe 4 to 5 days in the entire year where the parking system was maxed out and we were turning customers away. Otherwise, I really feel like after all these years of managing the system, right now before development, we were pretty right-sized to handle even the worst summer days and holidays. So, you're kind of left with thinking, okay, what demand do you build for? And there has to be a reasonable assessment of, maybe 80% is the right number. You're going to have some real heavy days where people are going to have to park and walk a little bit. But, what happens after August, what we've seen traditionally is that the garages are completely underutilized. And in our market, we're looking, $35,000 a structured space was about the right number. I don't know where that number is today between supply chain issues. What concrete costs now. I mean, the markets are really skewed. And the other thing is, how do you deal with the shore town problem that we have with Crayola, right? So 8 weeks of the year, they pack visitors in, and then the rest of the year, those spaces go underutilized. And so, we had talked in the committee that a more sensible solution, instead of spending $35,000 a space to satisfy a very short-term, demand on our resources, is off-site parking. One of the things that came to our mind was the college is not in session during our busiest season. They have a 300-space parking lot literally right up the street. Is there the ability to work in that shared space? And I think there is. And I think that's how you really get over the hump. But in my mind, the developments are less of an unpredictable element and impact to the parking system than the visitorship, which is seasonal. it's intense for a short amount of time and then it goes away. And then really we're left with, like the mayor said, today we have 500 spaces that are just completely underutilized. Maybe they'll get filled in a little bit more as these projects develop, and I think that'll be the case. But the other side of that to our local businesses is that now we have a bigger captive audience to patronize those businesses, and I think essentially that was the thinking behind putting other things in that space besides just parking. But I just wanted to note about thinking about building for peak demand and where you want to be in satisfying that, and also the seasonality of and intensity of that one use, and how much do we spend on that. And we could probably go on for days about the city's ability to incur more and more debt for this particular purpose. So thank you.
Is there
Are
anybody
there any
else?
more questions from the audience?
I see somebody with their hand raised. I do just want to note, and it's not to discourage you, sir, there will be a public comment portion during the city council's agenda when they reconvene. If you have comments relevant to this proposal, though, we're certainly happy to hear you, sir. Yep, sure.
So my name is Guy Feiner, and I own 225 Ferry Street, along with a whole host of other properties. I think as described, you're kind of the victims of your own success, right? Easton is an amazing place. I absolutely love Easton, and all of my personal investments are here. We've struggled with parking at 225 Ferry. I think that you're sitting on a pile of gold, right? There's only so much space in downtown. Before a move like this happens, I think the scientific result of the best result for everyone in the group itself happens when everybody does what's best for themselves and the group. That's John Nash. If you remember the movie A Beautiful Mind, you have to think about what's best for you, for the city, for the residents of the city, for the guests that come in. We're about to develop 8 Center Square. That project is funded. We want to go 5 stories high. It's going to be, apartments and a restaurant and a rooftop bar. You have so many historic buildings that you can't put parking under. And people like me come in with money from the outside. Here's a representation of what's happening, right? This is a looking glass to the future. We're going to build more. We're going to develop more. We're going to bring more people in. 275 units here at the Marquee mean to me as a developer 275 parking spots. However you're putting it on paper projections, people that rent, bring in a car. That's what we have with all of our units all over Easton. And so I want you to consider and think about this long and hard before you say yes. And I know there is tax money, there is money to go finance 4th Street. Maybe there is another way to look at this and slow down the process for a second and just think about what you're about to give up, because you, the city of Easton, will never get this piece of land back. You will not have control over it. You will not be able to build more parking, and maybe you'll be farther down, maybe you'll find another lot. But it seems so sensitive, and the timing of this is so critical that my personal feeling is that we should slow down a second, really think about what's happening to the city and to downtown, and also how it's affecting the rest of it, right? Our new office is in the West Ward. There's a very specific reason for it. So this is the engine that fuels the investment in the rest of the city in my mind, and anything that happens here, especially with this lot, should be scrutinized, considered, and thought about long and hard before that decision is made. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Skip, I'm just going to poll the room, see if is there anybody else who would care to make a comment on this specific proposal? Okay, I'm not seeing any, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Graham. And thank everyone for all those comments. Very helpful.
Skip, before we move on to a vote, I still have some questions.
Okay.
So one of the reasons why I initially balked at this proposal, without even knowing the details, when we heard about it a few days ago, was because of the purchase price. The $3 million purchase price seemed very low to me and some other members of the parking authority. And I personally am not comfortable approving a sale of a choice piece of downtown property for any price without a full professional appraisal, which we haven't received yet. I understand that's expected to be coming in February. And I also am wondering if there has been any market study analysis done on what else we might be looking to put into this particular spot, because I agree with the mayor that we do not want just another parking garage. I believe that my fellow on the parking authority, Rob, Mr. Wozniak, also is not a fan of just adding more parking garages. So I think many of us are interested in understanding what else could be used, what else this property could be used for, because we all understand now that the current Pine Street parking garage has met the end of its life and it needs to be torn down. But the question is, what comes next and for how much? So I kind of wanted to give the city, before I vote against the project based merely on my issues with the dollar amount, I just wanted to set it out there to give the city an opportunity to comment and also to flesh it out with the fellow members of the parking authority. And if there was any, to see if there's any interest in delaying this to the vote on this, so that we don't have to give it a no vote today, but that we can get more information regarding an appraisal or a market feasibility study. And I believe that's also along the lines of the last person who commented. I didn't catch his name, but I think that might have been a guy who owns some property downtown. So any other responses to that comment?
I'll just add a quick comment to, this is Rob, by the way, Jamie. Yeah, I guess in to follow it with Jamie, you know, the $3 million, certainly it's money. But we were curious to know, you know, is that the fair value of the building? And especially knowing that there isn't an appraisal yet. And is this moving forward with the assumption that that appraisal will be supplied and then they'll figure out the final number at a later date, or is this the final number? And I know that money is actually then going to be re-spent on the current parking garage. I believe that was the plan, at least some of that money, due to cost overruns and stuff, complications.
I can't speak to the appraisal. Next door where the Confluence is, I believe the sale price was $3.5 million. That's a 3-acre site, which is a direct
Sorry,
comp.
who's speaking?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Dave Hopkins from the Public Works Department. So, that site was vetted from an appraisal standpoint. It's 3 acres in the downtown. That was a sale price of $3.5 million. That site is less than 1.5 acres. Mm-hmm. So that's just a sort of an anecdotal comment. I wanted to just offer something about the market study and uses on the property. So this property was put out to public bid. So this was a competitive process. We advertised publicly and we put it up on PennBid. The city received 4 proposals. The RFP metrics, there were metrics about how we would evaluate it. There was also, I would say, there was a fairly loose guideline just so we don't want to control what the market is able to offer a developer, right? So we could sit here all day and say we want a pond or we want a fountain, whatever you want, you can say you want, but if it doesn't work economically, you're not going to get it, and that is a fact. And so in our guidelines, we wanted a sort of a vibrant mixed use of commercial, residential, and to see what the market would bear when we put it out. And so, we got the proposals in. The committee did several interviews. We talked about, and I don't know if city center feels like commenting, but they brought in what they thought they could make work. and what was financially viable. And I think what they proposed is a
Dave,
yes.
Dave, that's not the same thing as the market like feasibility study, nor are our observations about other sales a proper appraisal. So those are still two pieces of factual missing information, and it doesn't matter what we can observe about other properties nearby that might have sold. That's not the same thing as an appraisal, and what came back from the RFP is also it doesn't tell us enough. And in addition, if you want to dig down into the RFP and what came back, that's a whole separate conversation, because I understand from some members of the committee that voted on the project that they only approved the project and voted to put this project forward based on their understanding that there would be daytime hourly parking available, which has now been removed from the equation. That's no longer part of this proposal. So it's all kind of a little messy and murky in there too, and we haven't even gotten into that. But
I can't speak to that. That's really just sort of secondhand information. The only thing I'll offer is that I'm not arguing that it's a market study what the RFP process represented. What I'm arguing is that you just canvassed all of the developers in the region as to what they think could work on the site. So essentially, you're testing the market.
Yeah, but if you do a market feasibility study, what you do is you send out a new RFP and say, hey, this is what we know works here.
We don't know what works there. What works there is what a developer is willing to put there. That's what works. You could ask for anything you want.
I mean, if you want to answer a question, the city's was not in a position to put out a market feasibility because the city wasn't going to develop the property in the pure sense. It wanted to sell the property with the intent of making it into some sort of tax yielding development project, and that was the bottom line. There have been market feasibility studies that the city and city staff have been privy to on 185 South 3rd Street, at the Boyd Theater lot, and for that matter, and even some other locations in which developers have shared the results of those studies, and the expense was borne on the developer. I mean, these are very expensive type of studies. I mean, we have looked at several hotel studies, and still there's nothing that has come to fruition. Similarly, the same thing is coming back from commercial type of projects, but ultimately, it's the market that's going to dictate what's going to go there. In that the developer who's going to take on the majority of the risk. And I do disagree that with you, Jamie, respectfully, that we do have staff that's knowledgeable in economic development and has background in real estate, et cetera, that when we look at other vacant lands, other vacant property in the city, they can be used as a comparable. And typically, we know we have a general idea of what the price is, and that's just the land. You're not selling an operating garage with the piece of land. You're selling a garage that's obsolete and needs to come down. So you're just essentially you're giving someone a lemon, and they have to take that down and bore all the costs. And we're fortunate enough with tax incentives on the property that we're not just giving away a tax incentive, but the city's also now getting at least 200 spaces that we know cost about in our costs and in the city's costs, because we have prevailing wage requirements, could run anywhere between $30,000 and $35,000 a space. And as you go up, it costs it could cost even more.
Those 200 spaces. Those 200 spaces. Can you explain those 200 spaces again? What are those 200 spaces?
In the Marquee project, those are the 200 spaces that the developer is offering as a shared space for businesses in the downtown.
As monthly parking.
Yeah.
Correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
This is Joel Shear, the solicitor for the city. I just want to point out somewhere for the record, because we've been all around the place, but we haven't been very specific. This project has been publicly vetted with public meetings before the preferred developer was selected, plus a city council meeting.
Joel, that's a bit disingenuous. Joel, that's
Yes.
disingenuous. The meetings at which this was publicly vetted, are you talking about the selection committee where they all had to sign NDAs?
No,
and they're not allowed to speak to
I'm
anyone
talking
about
about city council meetings. I just want to be clear, there was one city council meeting that was open to the public to hear what the developer was proposing. No vote by city council. There was a second meeting, a meeting where there was actually a resolution proposing the preferred developer, in which city council approved going ahead to negotiate an agreement of sale. And that's what, at the last city council meeting, was formally introduced. All these meetings were held in the open public. There was significant publicity. And I just wanted to be clear, this isn't a project that's coming before us tonight for the first time. This has been lingering for quite some time, and all the issues and questions that were asked were part of the discussion.
Joel.
So the question, none of these comments were introduced or offered for assistance purposes. And I just wanted to be clear on the record that this is not coming for the first time, that there were two city council meetings open to the public in which the specific project was discussed before the agreement of sale was introduced as a operating agreement as to exactly what the price was going to be, what the parking spots, the licensing agreement to give the 200 monthly spots, those were all part of the negotiation process. So that's the only point I want to make.
Okay, well, that's not helpful comment. It doesn't move anything forward, and that has nothing to do with closing the conversation here to say, well, you guys shouldn't be talking about it now because you had an opportunity to talk about it before. That's just not helpful. So, thanks. Anything else substantive?
Jamie, do you have any further questions?
No.
Okay, hearing, and again, I'll defer to Graham. Are there any other members of the audience that had questions?
I'm not seeing any, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Hearing none, then we will move on this proposal. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the sale of the 3rd and Pine Street Garage to Center City Development Corporation?
I'll make the motion for the sale of the garage.
Okay, that was George?
Yes, it is.
Okay. George offered the motion. I will second that motion. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this motion?
I will not be approving the motion due to the lack of additional information regarding appraisal value, and that is still coming and it's due in February. I don't see why we're not having a discussion about this project at that time.
Thank you, Jamie. Any other discussion? We will now vote on this motion. I will poll each authority member since I cannot see them in person for their vote. Jamie Kulak, do you vote yes or no?
No.
George Borowski, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
I vote yes. Rob Wozniak, do you vote yes or no?
I vote yes.
Okay, then with a vote of 3-1, the motion passes. Next on the agenda, we're going to be comments from the floor, but I think we've already covered that. But are there any further comments before we close the meeting?
I'm not seeing any, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Make the motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. This special meeting of the Easton Parking Authority is now adjourned.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, gentlemen. Bye-bye.
No, I don't think so.
Well, Jorge.
Graham, thank you, George. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Mayor.
Bye, guy. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Happy holidays.
Thanks, Rob. Take care. Hey, by the way, beautiful. You did a great job. He's gonna get an award, but you should get.
Well, I'm glad he's getting one. How you doing? I'm all right. Hanging in there. How you doing? Merry Christmas. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Hi, David.
Negative.
How are you?
No, that's not. No.
Oh, is this?
Kingsley, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at your son's birthday. All right.
You see?
His son's birthday's today. His 9th birthday. We told him not to come.
I love you, Kenny. And he's here. He better go home.
They're putting up here.
I'll take it.
Oh,
See you later.
boy. Okay, we're going to call this meeting back into from recess back into order. We left off with the approval of the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any additions, movement for approval of the agenda?
I just need a motion to approve it.
We can leave, moved and seconded. We can leave Bill 46 on the agenda. Thanks to the good work of the Parking Authority.
Mayor?
Yes.
When we get to that, though, I'm going to suggest an amendment
Sure.
to eliminate section 2 of the ordinance and just renumber it sections 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that'll be easy because I'm not adding any language. It's just that language was, I'll admit, inartfully drawn. I wanted to make it clear that we needed the independent action of the Easton Parking Authority before you voted at the time.
We have that now.
And we drafted it before
Before
we
the meeting.
decided to have the December 22nd meeting. So if we just eliminate that, we know the approval's there, and you could go ahead and move
Thank you,
the
Mr.
rest of the
Solicitor.
resolution.
Appreciate that.
I need a second on approving the agenda.
David Bill O'Connell.
You moved it.
I'll second.
We can say one of
right.
those two.
Mr. Milan?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Mayor Pianto?
Aye.
And Mr. Brown?
Aye. Public comment on agenda items only.
We gotta approve the minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry, minute. Why I always skip that one? I just want to get to the public. Approval of the minutes of our December 8th meeting.
I'll move the minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additions, deletions, or corrections? Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Milan?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Mayor Pianto?
Aye.
And Mr. Brown?
Aye. Now we're at public comment on agenda items only. There will be another time at the end of the meeting on anything concerning the city of Easton. Anyone? Okay, consent agenda, Madam Clerk.
Under the consent agenda, we have a resolution being introduced by Mr. O'Connell where the city council would approve a third handicap parking space in the 500 block of Center Street.
Move the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additions or corrections? Roll call.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Mr. Milan?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
And Mayor Panto.
Aye. I will receive the report of the fire department for November 2021 and move on to committee reports. Finance Committee, Vice Mayor Brown.
Mayor, I have no report this evening.
Economic Development, Mrs. Volcano.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank everyone for all the efforts that they did to make our city downtown look lively and vibrant, and it just took a lot of work and a lot of staff on the part of GEDP and the Easton staff and all the volunteers, because it certainly has made the holidays wonderful down here for all of us, and hopefully very prosperous too. And I'd like to wish everyone a very happy Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I'll see you in 2022.
Thank you, Mrs.
On
Volcano.
the 3rd, Sam.
On January,
on the
January 3rd. Planning and Code Committee, Mr. O'Connell.
I have no report, Mayor.
Public Safety, Dr. Ruggles.
I have no report.
Public Works isn't here. Administration, Mr. Milan.
Nothing, Mayor.
Report of City Solicitor, Mr. Shear.
No report, thank you.
Report of the Mayor, I'm going to make it very quick. The city is experiencing some severe COVID cases. Mr. Hopkins, DPW, had several people out. Fire Department has several people out. I just want to let you know that COVID is still around, and we should be very careful about it. We have released the mask requirement in City Hall as per CDC requirements. We do follow the CDC, and they are now requiring masks only in hospitals and transportation centers. I was on a Zoom call this week with State Legislature, State Representative Sterla from Lancaster County, as well as the Pennsylvania Municipal League Legislative Committee, and just want to let you know, in case I did see it on PCN, the fireworks legislation that we all don't like is under consideration again, but I will tell you it will not be repealed. But there is some legislation that will make it a little bit stronger for municipalities. We may be able to make them actually illegal. One amendment makes them illegal by municipal vote. Others are just putting more pressure on them, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll keep you posted on that. As Mrs. Volcano said, the Winter Village was a huge success. The vendors at the huts are telling us they did extremely well. If you were downtown any Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, you saw more people downtown. It reminded me of when I was growing up. There were so many people walking around. And we'll have a report. We have like a 22-question survey was put out to the Winter Village hut owner people, and they will tell us how they did and any suggestions they have for changes to the Winter Village. Next year, we're already planning it. We have a lot of inquiries, as Mr. Hopkins can tell you, into our skating rink, where we got it, how long it took, how much was it. We have a feeling that there's going to be a number of them by the various cities, including real close. ArtsQuest has asked for the details about it as well. And we're going to stay one step ahead. We'll do something else next year. I'm not sure, but we're not sure what that'll be. But we're going to continue to make that a holiday tradition every year. Also, that night before on the candle lighting, we did the walk down to the first Christmas tree. Easton is the home of the first Christmas tree in the United States, brought over by German immigrants. It goes back to 1600, but in Germany, but here it goes back to 1826 when they came over, and we had over 400 people in attendance walking from Center Square. We were led by the Big Easy Easton Brass Band, and it's getting larger and larger. We're really excited about that. So, report of City Administrator, Mr. Campos.
No report, Mayor.
No report. Okay, correspondence. We received a memo from the Board of Health regarding the moving of the vehicles during street sweeping, Madam Clerk.
Okay, we received the memo from Mr. Gill, who is our Chief Health Administrator. The Board of Health, at their meeting in December, deferred the decision to allow people with designated handicap parking spaces to remain in their spots during street sweeping, but they referred that back to City Council. The board feels that it's up to City Council to make that decision. That was the correspondence from them.
Okay, we'll take that up, Mr. O'Connell. Well, you won't be involved in that. So we'll try to schedule that for the January 11th. Will be the Tuesday before our meeting on the 12th. We'll schedule it for a committee meeting on the 11th to discuss that. If we have a meeting, if not, we'll just discuss it on the 12th.
Can I just say something
Sure.
to that effect, since I won't be, I could certainly do the public comment. I know the two of you, and I'm very hesitant and understanding of your quest, but I think that, in my opinion, I don't think we could do this, or I could do this if I had to vote on it, because we have so many handicapped people in the city that have handicapped spots, and to have to do this on street sweeping streets would just, in my opinion, be very difficult for the city and to appease everyone. And if we just did it for 2 and then more find out, it would just open up a really big can of worms, and I would have a very hard case personally to approve this. So I'm sorry, but it's 1 day a week, and it's from April until December, I believe it is, and I know it's a hardship, but it's just would, in my opinion, would be very difficult to approve something like this. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Anyone else want to address that?
Well, I agree with those comments. I don't think we should, I think it would be kind of opening Pandora's box if we made that kind of exception. I understand, believe me, I understand what.
The hardship.
So you jerked us around since July? Since July. Thank you. Next time I bring you to the lawyer.
Well, that one.
I'm going to have a second assistant, so that person could be in charge of it.
Yeah. That person won't get hired till the next year. Then they won't be back till
They're not coming back till
January
next
12th.
year, right.
All right. Unfinished business?
Okay, under unfinished business, oh my.
Say that again.
Under unfinished business, we have bill number 46 that was introduced by Mrs. Volcano. However, we want to amend that, correct?
Yes.
Yes, my suggestion, the way it was introduced, Section 2 read, the approval is conditioned upon approval by independent action of the Easton Parking Authority to be taken prior to formal adoption of this ordinance by the City Council at its January meeting. Now, as of the action that was taken 15 minutes ago, we know it's been approved, so we don't need that condition, and we're here on December 22nd. So I believe that my suggestion is we take Section 2 out, and besides which, that was not an action item. It was really a notice type of item, so everybody was aware that the parking authority had to do something. So my suggestion would be to eliminate Section 2 as being moot in essence, and to renumbers 3, 4, and 5 as 2, 3, and 4.
So
I need a motion to amend that.
Do you amend it first, or do you, on the motion?
You have to amend it first.
Motion to amend.
Motion to amend, then we'll make that motion to amend.
Second.
Any further discussion? I would just like to thank the parking authority for listening to the staff and approving this sale. I think there's some work that needs to be done next year with the parking authority ordinance. Back when the parking authority was formed, our ordinance, for example, still says that it sunsets December 31st, 2021. The extension that was given back when Mr. Mayor Mittman was proposing Riverwalk was never updated in our codified ordinances. They were to the end of, I think they added 25 years onto it, like 76 and 2076. So we need to look at that. And basically, we'll keep the parking authority as an entity, much like our municipal authority. But really, what the parking authority is, their sole responsibility is to be a civilian review board for parking tickets. If a person feels they got a parking ticket by mistake, they can go to that board and appeal it if they don't win it at the police station. So I think we have some work to do on that. We'll look at it next year. So that's.
I have to take a vote on the amendment, and then we have to take
Right.
a vote on it. Okay.
So we'll take a roll call and vote on the amendment.
We're gonna have discussion, all right? On the
Yes,
actual-
right now.
okay. Right now, you wanna do it after the
Yeah,
amendment?
the amendment is now. Oh, on the full bill?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll do it on the
Just wanna
amendment.
make clear, that's all.
Okay. So, Mr. Brown for the amendment.
Aye.
Mayor Panto?
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
And Mr. Milan?
Aye.
Now, on the full motion, I would like to just remind City Council, and I know you know this, but the sale price does not include demolition. The developer is demolishing the property. And I know that Mr. Campos was somewhat misconstrued when he talked about our union labor. We do use union labor on all of our, matter of fact, we're just in the process of rebidding something that we forgot. The proposal does not, the request for bid did not put in about the PLA for our Center Square project, so we have to redo it. It was just meant that the developer can take it down less than we can, because the developer isn't subjected to prevailing wages, but we are subjected to PLA. And I just want, in case you hear that rumor, the fact is that they're not paying $3 million for a vacant piece of property. They're paying $3 million for a piece of property that they have to demolish. And our estimate is extremely expensive. So, Mr. Milan, you had a...
Yeah, Mayor, thanks. I mean, I think just from a parking availability perspective, I'm not going to echo the parking authority's concerns, because I think mine are separate. My one concern I want to express to the administration is, where did you guys come up with 100 additional on-street spaces in downtown? Like, this is, I mean, I don't know if my colleagues took notice of that, but this is the first time we're hearing about this. Like 100 additional on-street spaces in downtown. Like, I guess for me.
Well, we did bring it up to City Council when we asked you to vote for one-way on Northampton Street for the 200. The one-way streets with angle parking created 20 spaces per block. Right there's 40. And then we added all of our parking spaces on Pine Street. That's sort of both.
I think I just want to discuss, like, is that net? Because that can't be net. I mean, the 300 block on Northampton Street, we couldn't have increased it by that many spaces. I think maybe the net's lower.
Where did Mr. Hopkins go?
He stepped out, but you're right, Mayor. I don't know if I don't recall which council meeting, but we did discuss where we were going to be adding spaces, but we can formally bring that up. Dave stepped out just to check on a technical item that I asked him to take a look at. He'll be right back.
Okay.
But he can certainly address that, and we can go over where those 100 spaces are.
I mean, if they're up on the hill, which I think a lot of them are, I'm not sure how we just kind of created 100 spaces downtown.
College Avenue you're talking about.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to defer
That's
to Dave
fine.
when he comes
I'm
back.
sure it includes College Avenue.
I think it does, but
I
not.
think there was 60 downtown and 40 on the hill.
Yeah, but there's also Larry Holmes Drive that it's also with the permitting and being
Right,
able
moving.
to allow permit parkers onto Larry Holmes Drive. I'll have, when Dave comes back, we can go through that.
Can hold the vote.
What are we doing with? Is Hearst going to be renting spaces from our garage here?
Yes.
How many?
Right now, it's just a third of their workforce. It's rotating,
Which is
I don't know, 60,
Don't set
60?
down.
60.
Yeah.
and with the Confluence, they have a lot for how many spaces?
I don't. It's the confluence is still not complete yet.
right.
I'll hesitate to give you an answer,
All right,
but
and they're going to build. Are they building a bridge from their property?
That's
to
in
the
the
park?
so they have represented that verbally, but that's informally. I haven't seen any plans yet.
Okay.
Dave's
So,
there.
and the amount of monthly spaces we have in Pine Street are 375. That's the number I got from the administration.
Yeah, that's too high.
Yeah, and that's skewed.
It's skewed because Crayola is no longer using volunteers. They're using employees. And when they had volunteers, those volunteers may have numbered 100, and the city, under the lease that was negotiated by Mayor Goldsmith, they gave them 55 spaces, Dave? It was 55 spaces to take care of their volunteers. I know that they don't have 55 employees. So as of today's staff meeting, we're trying to get Mark unfortunately wasn't in today, but we're trying to get an accurate number of that, because I think it's closer to 300, not 375 or 350.
I mean, respectfully, Mayor, it's a number I got from Lewis.
Yeah, that's
I mean, I just want to be clear, like.
The number is real.
Okay.
I don't think there's a number of people that are using it.
I mean,
like today, there was over 500 spaces available.
Sure, I understand that. I guess just from my personal perspective, and again, I'm looking at the study too, which I know has its own issues. I really do think we're creating a deficit downtown. I know there's net space. You mentioned something about 200 spaces that we're increasing, and then there's another number of 300 spaces. But I just think that with all the residential development downtown, I really do think we are going to box ourselves into a corner. And just from a planning perspective, which I'm not a planner, just from someone who kind of understands it, just from a very low level perspective, I want to express my concern to the administration that if we go through this, which I'm sure it's going to go through, that we don't create a long-term problem for us for a short-term gain. And I think it's incumbent on us as elected officials to really look at this, not just from a today perspective, but from a tomorrow perspective. Because just what was the gentleman's name?
Haggai Feiner.
I didn't know he purchased 8 Center Square.
He did.
And to say that he's going to go up 5 stories with residential development and add more density downtown, I mean, from my perspective, it's concerning. I mean, I think our garage here is going to be utilized heavily when the Pine Street garage gets knocked down. The 4th Street garage is going to be utilized heavily. And, as much as I think people are going to be, migrating to the garages, I really think that having this quote unquote deficit is going to create a headache for us that we're just not, to me, we're overlooking.
Mr. Milan, one observation, and it was triggered in part by the comments by Mr. Feiner. When he talked about building up on and it's totally independent of your vote tonight, because I don't see where you would vote any differently, because this whole project is based on what exists. But the planning committee of the city council might really want to look at our zoning, because we rezoned that downtown area to eliminate the need to go out for parking. And I've always...
No, we made it 50%.
50, is it 50? Okay. It's been a concern that we invite building up and not addressing the issue.
If Mr. Haggai, who doesn't have any on-site parking there, he will need to provide parking for his people.
Absolutely.
If we don't have any space in the garage, he can't go up 5 stories. The only way you're going to limit, we just had this conversation with Stephen today, the only way you're going to limit the density height is by the city right now. We contracted with Seville for 70 spaces. If they couldn't get the 70 spaces from us, they couldn't build 70 units. And so sooner or later, we're gonna max out. You're right, Peter. We're gonna max out our garages, and then there can't be any development. Because right now our zoning still requires parking spaces.
It will limit the type of development, which isn't necessarily bad from a citizen's point of view.
Of course not. And I think just to kind of, I don't want to speak on behalf of other people who bought downtown, but I think the Marion who's I'm referring to, there are other people who purchase real estate in the downtown area who have plans on increasing density. I'm not going to name names, but just rumor around the downtown is that there are some people who have purchased real estate recently who are going to build up.
But I will tell you, and Rob's here, who's much more knowledgeable than I am about, and has much more experience in renting homes and renting apartments. If the developer builds 20 apartments and doesn't have a place for those people to stay, they're not renting it. That's what it comes down to. I was fortunate. I built apartments out in the suburbs, but I can tell you, even over at Shaw School that we developed, we have where the South Side Library used to be, wasn't there, so we made it a parking lot. We bought that land. But there's not any vacant land downtown that's not already prime. I will tell you that the city should never allow a private parking lot to be sold to someone else other than the city. I always look at the Pomfret lot. The Pomfret Club lot was not, from what I understand, it was offered to the city, and the city said no, sell it to the Pomfret Club. That to me is 40 spaces that we lost.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
They're all day empty.
Right. But I think, again, I'm just from my perspective, I just from a planning perspective, I just don't want to box us in
I don't disagree with you at all.
I'm just being honest.
I don't disagree with you at all. I don't think, and we talk about the P word all the time,
Yeah.
and we know that, if I heard somebody today talk again about parking problems, and I see 500 spaces going unused, that bothers me. But we had 500 spaces today that weren't used. There should not have been a parking problem in downtown Easton. But if you can't park in front of the deli that you want to go to, parking problem.
But,
And correct me if I'm wrong here too. For any new building that's going up or already in existence, they must provide under codes so many parking spaces, correct?
Correct.
So that means that
That's there.
anyone coming into the city of Easton's buying property must consider that. If they cannot have the parking, then it's going to virtually it's going to affect them. What they have to change their plan before they even come to zoning, because it's deeded that way. Any new building is deeded to so many parking per apartment. Or,
But Mr. Milan is right. But I see this as maybe a 10-year problem.
absolutely.
So we've looked at it, their next 10 years, and how many developments will really come online in 10 years, because I really believe that in 10 years, cars are going to be a thing of the past, that they're going to be self-driven auto control and self-driven cars
me
that
in it.
take you and go back to your docking station, or just using other people's cars. I have people arguing with me now that we don't need any parking because we're going to have these cars of the future. That's true. But in Easton, it's probably 20 years away. If it's 10 years away in New York, in Pittsburgh, which it's already in Pittsburgh, it's at least 10 years away from here, in here.
Mayor, can I just, for clarification, if you don't mind, when we created, I think we have a problem. It's the business entertainment district. We have no parking requirements.
That's that small, within this, it's not the whole central business, it's just a small area.
It's the circle.
It's a circle.
It's
Yeah.
circle. That's where these properties, but that's where these developments can happen now.
They're going to start to happen.
Right.
They haven't
So,
happened yet.
I just wanted to throw this out there. I mean,
Well, that's something I think the planning committee should take up next year.
yeah, I mean, it's, basically, like, we don't require any off-street parking.
No, you're absolutely right, in the circle
So
properties.
I think it's just, it's just something that you guys should really keep in the back of your heads as we kind of progress with this.
Good point. Okay,
Okay, so we have a motion by Sandy then to approve now the amended thing, and I need a second for that.
Second.
okay, any other discussion on the sale of the 227 South Third Street? Roll call.
Mr. Milan?
No.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Mayor Panto?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Hang on a second. Okay, we have Bill 47. Bill 47 being introduced by Mr. Panto, approving an addendum to a lease agreement between the City of Easton and Valor Independent Group, and it's for suite number 4 at 123 South 3rd Street.
So moved.
Second.
So introduced. No, it's moved now, it's unfinished. So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Mayor Panto?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Mr. Milan?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Okay, we have Bill number 48 that was introduced by Mayor Panto also, approving an addendum to a lease between the City of Easton and Valor Independent Group for suite number 5 at 123.
So introduced.
Move.
Moved.
Second.
Moved in second, discussion. Roll call.
Mayor Panto?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Mr. Milan?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
And Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Okay. We have a resolution being introduced by Mrs. Volcano, approving a job description for the position of American Rescue Plan Act Project Manager.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. Again, this position will be paid for by the budget that was presented to you for ARPA funds to actually manage that.
So, what's going to happen after the funds are?
Depleted. We'll
We
see.
have, there's 4
If they
years,
need it.
if it's not needed in 2026, it'll be dispersed, and it'll be discontinued. person, I think it's even in the advertisement that it's possibly a 3 to 4 year position.
Any of those positions, the individuals are going to know that the funding is only there for a specific amount of time.
True.
May I ask one question?
Yes,
Would they
sure.
be part of the union?
No, they're
These
management.
positions are not.
So they would not be
That's correct.
eligible to, would they be eligible to bid into another position?
No.
That was, okay, thank you.
They'd be eligible to
They'd be
apply for
eligible,
it.
but they
Became
went
open to the public. It
to
was-
the public, right. Thank you.
Okay, roll call.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Mayor Pianto?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Mr. Milan?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Okay, we have a resolution also being introduced by Mrs. Volcano, approving a job description for the position of grant administrator.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second, any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Milan?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Mayor Pianto?
Aye.
And Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Okay, we have a resolution being introduced by Mr. Milan, approving an amendment to the 2022 salary and wages, which would include these new positions that you just approved the job descriptions for.
Moved.
Second.
Moved in second, discussion? Roll call.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Mayor Pianto?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
And Mr. Milan?
Aye.
Before we get to public comment, Mr. Hopkins, if you could come up to the podium, there was a question while you were out.
Jesus, I don't remember what my question was.
Your question was, where's the 100?
Question was,
Mr.
where's
Campos
the
said there was 100 spaces that were added to the on-street downtown. Where were they? I said 20 spaces on the 300 block of Northampton Street due to the angle parking. There was some discussion whether that was accurate or not.
Yeah, that's accurate. I'm trying to think. I think there were 13 on Pine. I think 7 or 8 between Spruce and Bank.
So David, what was the net
13.
gain on the 300 block of Northampton Street?
20.
It might have been 18 or 19.
The net gain?
Yeah. Because we kept the parallel on the north side, but
Right.
we were able to, so if you take a 22-foot space
Right.
and angle it, we were able to get 18 new spaces.
But that's not a net gain, though. You
That's
took
a
away
net gain.
What was the parallel parking before it, though?
18 less than what's there today.
But there was parallel parking on the side, though.
There was.
How many spaces were there?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know the net gain was 18 spaces.
That's what you're asking.
It
Where's
doesn't.
the extra 100?
It doesn't sound right, though.
That could be.
That's the way we counted it.
For every space, you're going to get 2.
There were also instances. There's a grocer alley next to Amman,
We had it.
which wasn't formerly a space. We used that, and we spoke to the building owner,
Okay.
and they had a bollard there. There was no reason not to put a space there. So there were
Seems like a lot. That's all. I mean, going from parallel parking to angle parking, it seemed like it was a massive gain.
No.
It was a massive gain.
But it doesn't seem practical. That's all.
I could show you on paper.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. And at this point in our meeting, we have public comment. Is there anyone in the public that would like to address City Council? Seeing none?
Before you adjourn.
Go ahead,
adjourn.
Madam Volcano.
Can I just
Second.
say, I'd
Go
like
ahead.
to thank Mr. Solomon for coming tonight, thinking this was my last meeting. I certainly appreciate your presence being here. Thank you so very much. It was very thoughtful of you. But I will be here one more time on the 3rd.
We won't give our sob story until January 3rd.
No, we're not passing out tissues.
We're
We're not passing them out.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah.
Or hankies.
Sandy, the meeting was Monday the 3rd.
3rd. I said the 3rd, didn't I
He
just
said the
say
3rd. She said
Oh,
the
I
3rd.
thought she
It
said.
sounded like the 2nd.
No, I said the 3rd.
I'm calling you, Sandy.
You better, Ken.
Motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved in second, discussion, roll call.
Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruggles?
Aye.
Mrs. Volcano?
Aye.
Mayor Pianto?
Aye.
Mr. Brown?
Aye, aye,
And
aye.
Mr. Milan?
You better call me, Kenny.
I'm calling you.